I'm Felicia. The memory of that day is still seared into my mind, like a brand on the back of my eyelids. I was standing in my childhood home, a place that once held comfort but now reeked of betrayal. My son, Ethan, was in my arms, burning with a fever, and I was looking at a room that was no longer his. Ethan, a bright and curious 7-year-old, had been staying with my mother, Helen, while I was away working as a geologist on a remote oil rig. It was a high-paying job, one that promised a better future for my son. I had left him in what I thought was safe hands, but what I found when I returned shattered my world. I remembered the moment I first saw the paper plate. It was a simple thing, a floral-patterned plate from the dollar store, but it told a story of neglect and disregard. There was a scoop of leftover rice and a few green beans on it, cold and drying at the edges. It was placed right next to a cot in the basement, where Ethan was sleeping. The cot was wedged between a water heater and a stack of old boxes. An extension cord snaked across the concrete floor to a nightlight shaped like a spaceship, a gift I had bought him at the Seattle airport a year ago. He had loved that nightlight, saying it made the dark feel like space. There was also a fleece blanket, balled up at the foot of the cot, a blanket I didn't recognize. I knelt down and touched Ethan's forehead. It was burning hot, not the warm from playing hot, but the kind of hot that sends a chill down your spine. I didn't need a thermometer, my years of working in harsh environments had taught me what a fever felt like. I knew he needed a hospital. Ethan, I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom's here. He opened his eyes halfway, looking at me as if I was a dream. Then his hand found my wrist and held on tight. Something in my chest shifted, like the moment before an earthquake when the ground starts to tremble. I picked him up. He was so light, lighter than a 7-year-old should be. As I carried him up the basement stairs, I passed by a living room with a new sectional sofa that I didn't recognize. It looked expensive, a clear contrast to the meager conditions in the basement. In the kitchen, there were real ceramic bowls in the sink, with little painted flowers on the rim. They were a far cry from the paper plate Ethan had been eating from. I also passed by the family photo wall. I didn't stop to look at the pictures then, but something about the arrangement caught my eye. It was like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. At the top of the stairs, I turned left towards Ethan's room. The room that used to have blue walls with glow-in-the-dark star stickers and a bookshelf I had built for him. The bookshelf where I had hidden little notes in his favorite books, telling him how much I loved him. But when I opened the door, I couldn't believe what I saw. The blue walls were now pink. A fancy canopy bed sat where his twin bed used to be. There was a pile of stuffed animals, arranged like a display in a toy store. And in the middle of the bed, asleep, was my niece, Ava, a 5-year-old with dark curly hair. Ethan's bookshelf was gone. It was as if he had been erased from this room. I stood there, holding Ethan close to my chest, and I felt a rage building inside me. I started to count the cost of the new decorations in my head, the canopy bed, the dresser, the rug, the curtains. Someone had spent a lot of money to turn this into Ava's dream room, while my son was sleeping in the basement on a cot. "Oh, you're early," my mother said, appearing at the end of the hallway. She was wearing a robe and holding a coffee mug, looking like she had just been caught in a lie. "His fever's at least 103 degrees, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "How long has he been sick?" "A couple of days." "It's just a cold, Felicia. Kids get colds." "He's in the basement, the storage room. We made it nice for him. He has a nightlight and everything. His room is pink now because Ava needed a real room. Her parents, your sister Lisa and her husband Mark, are going through a rough patch and she can't sleep on the couch." I remembered hearing those same words when I was a child. "Your sister is smaller. She needs a real room. You're the big girl." I had slept on the couch for years while my sister had the bedroom with the big window. I had never complained, thinking that being good meant not causing trouble. I didn't answer my mother. I shifted Ethan higher on my hip and walked down the stairs to the storage room. I grabbed his backpack, which was already packed and zipped, as if he had been waiting for this moment. My father's old armchair was still there, against the far wall. It was a brown leather chair with cracked armrests. It was the only thing in the house that still held any warmth, any love. Ethan had been sleeping just a few feet away from it. I walked out of the house without another word, strapped Ethan into the back seat of my car, and drove away. I didn't know where home was anymore, but I knew it wasn't here. As I drove to the urgent care center, Ethan held my wrist tightly. It was the same place he used to grab when he was a toddler and couldn't reach my hand. I had thought he had grown out of it, but now I realized he had been saving it for when he really needed me. I remembered the day I left for the oil rig. It was at the Seattle airport, early in the morning. Ethan was trying so hard to be brave, but I could see the fear in his eyes. "It's only for a little while, baby," I had told him. "Grandma's going to take good care of you, and I'll call you every week. You can show me all your new toys on FaceTime." He had nodded, his fingers tightening on my wrist. Behind us, my mother had stood there with a big smile on her face, telling me to go and do my thing. She had said that she and Ethan were going to have a great time. I had believed her. I had no reason not to. My mother was a strong and opinionated woman, but I thought she loved Ethan as much as I did. The job on the oil rig was tough. The days were long, and the conditions were harsh. But the money was good. I was making $150,000 a year, almost double what I would have made in a regular office job. I was doing it for Ethan, for his future, for his college fund. Before I left, I had set up an automatic transfer of $6,000 from my account to my mother's every month. I had done the math, making sure there was enough money for everything: the mortgage, groceries, Ethan's school, and his activities. I wanted her to be comfortable and to take good care of my son. I had also built Ethan a bookshelf from a flat pack kit. It was a frustrating process, with all those wordless instructions, but I had done it for him. I had hidden little notes in his books, telling him how much I loved him and how proud I was of him. And every week, I had written him a real letter. I would draw pictures of the rig, the desert landscape, and the sunsets that looked like fire across the sky. I would mail those letters every Friday, no matter how tired I was. But over the past 14 months, something had changed. My mother would always tell me that Ethan was doing great on our weekly phone calls. And Ethan would say, "I'm fine, Mom." But the camera was always angled at his face, never showing the room. I had noticed it, but I had filed it away, thinking it was nothing. Then, on one of my rare trips back home, I had found Ethan in the basement, sick and alone. I sat in the urgent care parking lot, looking at the calculator on my phone. I had typed in $6,000 multiplied by 14. The result was $84,000. I stared at the number, feeling sick to my stomach. I carried Ethan inside the urgent care center. The doctor, a kind-looking woman in her 40s, examined him and told me that he had a bilateral ear infection and was mildly dehydrated. She also mentioned that he was a bit underweight for his age. "Has his diet changed recently?" she asked, looking at me directly. "I've been working out of state," I said. "He's been with my mother." She nodded, writing something on her clipboard. She prescribed some antibiotics, told me to give him plenty of fluids, and to bring him back for a follow-up in a week. At the hotel that night, I sat on the edge of the bed next to Ethan as he sipped on Pedialyte through a straw. I wanted to ask him so many questions, but I knew I had to be careful. I had to listen, to understand what had been going on. "When did Aunt Lisa and Uncle Mark move in?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "A while ago," he said, sucking on the straw. "After Ava's old apartment got too small." "And that's when you moved to the downstairs room?" "Grandma said Ava needed a girl's room," he said, as if it was a fact of life. "Do you like the downstairs room?" "It's okay. It's kind of cold sometimes, but Grandpa's chair is down there, so it's okay." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. "What about dinner?" Grandma makes Ava's favorites mostly. I eat after everyone else. She says it's easier that way because Ava is picky. I felt a lump in my throat. I was starting to understand the hierarchy in this house. Ava came first, and Ethan was an afterthought. I was still running the numbers in my head. The math of attention, of space, of who mattered. 1 bedroom for Ava, 1 living room full of her toys and shows, 1 dinner table where she ate first on real plates, and 1 storage room for Ethan, with a paper plate. That's when I got a text from Mrs. Thompson, my mother's neighbor. She had been like a second mother to me growing up. She said she had seen my car and that there were things I needed to know. She apologized for not calling sooner. The next morning, I met Mrs. Thompson at our old diner. It was a place I used to come to with my father on Sundays. She showed me pictures she had taken over the past few months. Pictures of Ethan in the backyard, wearing the same thin jacket I had packed for him a year ago. Pictures of Ava on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, while Ethan played alone in the cold. I felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over me. I needed to see where the money had gone. I had access to my mother's bank account through a mobile app one had set up for her. I started scrolling through the transaction history, and my blood boiled. There were payments for Lisa's car lease, $500 a month. There were payments for Ava's dance lessons, $250 a month. There was a big payment for new furniture for the living room, $3,000. And there were also several payments for my mother's hair salon appointments. I did the math. Out of the $6,000 a month I had been sending, Ethan was getting maybe $350 a month. That was less than 6% of the total. I knew I had to confront my mother. I went back to the house, and when I walked in, I could tell she was on edge. 14 months, I said, my voice cold. 61 transfers. $84,000. Where did it all go, my mom? She tried to make excuses, saying that Lisa and Mark were in a tough spot and that she was just trying to help. But I wasn't buying it. I looked at her and said, when I was a kid, you took my room for Lisa. And now, you've taken Ethan's room for Ava. How could you? I then pulled out my phone and canceled the automatic transfer. I watched as the screen showed the transfer was canceled, a small green check mark that felt like a victory. My mother's face turned pale. You can't do this, Felicia. The mortgage, the bills. I know, I said. Everyone in this house counted on that money, except the person it was meant for. I walked downstairs to the storage room, grabbed my father's old armchair, and dragged it out to my car. It was a heavy chair, just like my father had been a heavy presence in my life. As I drove away, I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. It was a house that had caused me so much pain, both as a child and now as a mother. I knew I was done being the big girl who just kept quiet and took it. 3 months later, I was in our new apartment in Seattle. Ethan had set the table for dinner. He was using the ceramic plates I had bought at the supermarket, and he had carefully folded the napkins into triangles. He looked up at me and said, "Mom, can we get a dog?" I laughed, a real, unburdened laugh. "We'll talk about it," I said. I knew that from now on, the only math that mattered was the math of our little family. 2 plates, 2 people, 100%. And I was going to make sure that every cent was spent on making our new home a place full of love and security.